Hi, this is Tim Lightfellow again, Kingdom of Volunteer in Society for Creative Anachronism. Today's video is about fletching. And first thing I wanted to do is show a couple different examples of fletching jigs. So this particular one is called a Joe John multi-fletch jig because it can hold 6 different arrows at a time. It is adjustable with these plates, these wing nut screws and this plate on the front to change the angle of the shafts. The clamps are hard metal in one direction. They don't change. So what you do is you shift the shaft left or right to get the angle you want for the fletching. These also have on the back, they have these pieces that are removable, and they have 3 and 4 fletch based on which direction you push them in here. And there are little ball bearings in there that lock them into place along the ridge. And by having them in there, you can literally pull the jig off. You turn this to the next one, set up your fletch, put the clamp back in. For this style, the clamp is literally using gravity. There's nothing else. It has a flat metal piece on the back that slides into a groove here, and then it has a round metal piece on the front that slides in here, and it literally just uses the weight to hold the fletch on. I've had varying luck with those. I have one of them that I was only able to ever do about 3 at a time because the way the pressure ended up, 3 of them the fletches would be up off the thing, so you'd end up with like they'd glue, but you could see through the glue and see under the fletch. But still, if you're doing multiple at once, they can be a very useful tool. Let me start with this one. This one is an older style. It is a Martin. I believe they call this a J8. It has clamps that are sold based on which wing it's for. So this one says left on it. So this is for left wing. You could buy a clamp for straight and a clamp for right wing. And on these, they use a magnet here and here to hold the clamp against the shaft to hold the fletch in place. They have adjustments here that let you adjust the angle that the fletch is being put on. And then in this back piece, it's hard to get enough light to show you, but there's a little bar. So the arrow nock goes across this bar. It basically acts like the string would, so that you can put the nock in there, it'll hold it in place, and then you literally just turn the back end. There are different attachments in the back, so this one is currently set up for this one is set up for 4 fletch. There are attachments. You literally unscrew this and change some of the innards, and you switch it over to 3 fletch. So if you're not doing a bunch at once, or what you'll see sometimes is if people are doing a bunch at once, they'll buy several of these and they may attach them to a turntable so they can spin them and do them, or just set a bunch side by side on a table. So that's a Martin. These are Grayling. These are new purchases. So I actually have the thing there. And again, these are designed basically just like the Martin. So same thing. We have a magnet that holds the clamp on against the shaft. We have the bar in the back for the nock to go around. And this one is set up for 3 fletch, but again, I could easily unscrew it, put the pieces in, change it over to 4 fletch. Same adjustments as well. This one, unlike the Martin, you can actually adjust this as well. So you can use this to help kind of fine tune where the shaft sits before you put the fletches on. One thing I've noticed, we have cats. These have hit the ground several times, and when these were loose enough, I ended up with these shifting slightly and went to put a fletch on and realized it wasn't lining up and had to kind of go through and fine tune things because, you know, something hits the ground from several feet up, it's going to get out of alignment. This also lets the Martin and this both have a screw here. I forgot to mention this, which lets you fine tune where the first one goes on. Trying to think of how to really explain this. So when you put the fletches on an arrow, especially if it's a 4-fletch, you want them aligned from the nock. So you want the nock to sit one way, and you want the fletches to be even out to the side from the nock. And you can adjust that here. If you have it wrong, what you'll end up with is one fletch is almost centered on the nock, and then the next one's extra far off, and so it doesn't sit on your bow correctly. There's probably a better way to explain that. Perhaps someone else can in comments or elsewhere. And same thing, these have slots on the bottom, so if someone wanted to screw them into a table or on a turntable, so they could have a bunch at once. And the same thing with the clamps, and these are actually, you can't even see it, it's hard printed in the plastic that says left. And again, I could buy a right wing one, could buy a straight one. This is another, same model. The difference on this is it actually has a rubber insert instead of the receiver for a nock, and what the rubber insert is for is for crossbow bolts. So if you don't have a nock on your crossbow bolts, you switch it out to the rubber receiver, and with a flat back crossbow bolt, it'll just slide into that. If I get it lined up right, it will just slide in, and then it's ready to have the nock on. Prior to getting this model, what I would do is literally tape an 11/32 nock on here, and then use one of the other jigs, slide it in, and twist it. Okay, there are other fletching jigs out there. There's, I'm suddenly drawing a blank on the name. There's a very popular, very expensive one that's all metal. It's silver color, but it's basically the same design, just metal. And it's, again, pretty popular among a lot of fletchers I've known. So that gives an idea of the tools. One thing that I'm seeing I didn't grab that I need to is some fletch glue, because I'm not going to get very far without that. So let me grab some fletch glue. I happen to use Duco cement. There's all kinds of stuff out there. Haven't used any of the others to say what I think of them. From what I understand, they're all pretty much similar in the way they're made, so I assume they all function pretty much the same. They're kind of a almost super glue, but generally not as viscous, not as flowy, so it's easier to get these to stay right where you put it, and plus they take a little longer to dry than super glue. Okay, so on to the process. Normally I would be making bolts and showing you that, but I figure I'd combine, since fletching is something we can have to do to repair, as well as something that we do when we're making. So I've got a couple bolts with this one. Actually just has one fletch, and it has the residue left from the other fletch. What I normally do is actually on my multi-tool have, I believe it's a rope cutting blade, and so it has little rounded areas. And what I will do on this is I will very carefully just kind of get it under the fletch and peel upward with it. What I don't want to do is dig into the wood, and that's, as I've discovered a couple times, very easy to do. So I'm not trying to get all the residue right now. I'm literally just kind of scooting along underneath the fletch and slowly peeling the fletch itself off of the shaft, which is going to leave some of the residue and some of the glue that's holding it behind. And then I'll show you what I do with that. And again, I try to stress that the way I'm showing you is one way to do it, and I'm sure there are many others, and I encourage people to watch other people's videos as well and learn different ways and figure out what works best for them. Okay, so fletches are gone, but all the residue and glue is still there. So now again with the curve, I'm going almost straight up and down, and I'm just going to kind of rub it along. And what I'm doing, sorry, I'm trying to hold this over the garbage. What I'm doing is I'm literally just kind of scraping and getting the residue off that way, because again, I don't want to put the blade into the wood, because then you either have to put the fletch in a different spot, or if you cut too much of the wood, you can end up sacrificing your arrow or bolt because you've cut it and created a weak spot. So, okay, so that's one side. I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to do the other side because I need to put fletches on both. One thing that can be tricky if you're trying to replace a fletch is trying to get it lined up to the way it was. So for me, usually I am thankfully in a position where with crossbow bolts, I usually just replace both fletches at once. That way I don't have to worry about trying to line up the new one with the old one. With arrows, what I hope for is that I did them on my jig, because then if I put it in, it should be lined up. Otherwise, what I can do is put it in. I can loosen this screw, like I mentioned, that helps with the adjustment. And then I can literally kind of tweak it to the point where the clamp seems to be lining up with the fletch, lock that screw back down, and then twist it to where the new fletch goes and glue it on. So there are ways and tricks to do that. And again, that's something I've not done a lot because I'm a crossbow shooter. So there are probably others who have better tips and tricks on ways to align it. But that's what I've done in the past, and it seemed to work well. Okay, so I'm making sure that this is in the slot at the front. I'm pushing it into the receiver in the back. I am taking, in this case, it looks like what I had left over was some yellow and some black, so I'm doing 2 bolts. Just going to do one for the video, and I'll do the other one after, just so I have these 2 crossbow bolts repaired. If you order extra which I always recommend on fletches, it gives you the opportunity to look them over and choose the ones you want to use. So I happen to have 3 here, but I have one that has a big gap in it. And so I'm going to choose the 2 that look solid. Occasionally what I'll see is sometimes when they cut the, I believe the right phrase is the quick, the actual feather shaft, they'll cut it super thin. And so sometimes I look for those, and those will be the ones I set aside because they're harder to glue. The glue is going to be more likely to also stick to the clamp, and then you can end up with the clamp stuck to the fletch and to the shaft. So I've picked the 2 I'm going to use. Because I know this jig, I know that I literally want these down at the bottom. One other thing I should mention is most of these, if I can get the light, there's a grid. There are lines so that you can use those to tell where you're putting the fletch, so you can do it the same on each one. On the Jojon, it doesn't have that. So what I did was I went through and I put a fine tip permanent mark in the same spot on all the clamps so that I was sure that I was putting them in the same spot as I lined it up. So I am lining this up with the back and pushing it in to make sure it's all the way clamped in. Basically what you want is you want the quick sticking out of the fletching jig and the rest of the feathers in it. I'm then going to take, hopefully this is a good tube, it's pretty close to empty. And normally when I'm doing this, I make sure I have tissue, which I do over to my right. And I'm going to step up and grab a different glue because that one is dead. Thankfully, it is still here in the room because this is where I do a lot of my work. So grab a different tube of Duco cement. And what I'm looking to do is just put a nice consistent bead of glue along the fletch. And sometimes, again, when you first start, as you put the pressure on the tube, sometimes the first bit of glue that comes out is too much. And so I'll have to wipe it off. This time it's going to cooperate. So I put a bead of glue along the edge. What I do is I push the back against that just for me to know, because that rubber piece sticks out, so it creates a lip that I've occasionally caught the back on, so the back of the fletch wasn't actually in place. I put it down, I make sure it's on. I just kind of gently push it against it, and I'll set it aside. This will take 10 to 15 minutes to dry, usually with Duco cement. I'm going to also cover that so I don't end up with another tube of dried out glue. Once that's done, I take the clamp off. This one's set up for 4 fletch, and for crossbow bolts you do 2 fletch, or at least I do. So it's opposite sides. So I will click it twice, and then I'll set up the next fletch and glue it on. Once they're done, another thing I've learned to do is I will put a small dab of glue at the very front of the fletch and at the very back to help kind of lock it down onto the shaft. That gives it a little more stability. Like if it has to get pulled through a bale or something, it's a little harder for straw or something to work its way under it and peel your fletch off when you pull it through. It also helps keep it locked down. We've seen some people who didn't do that end up with, as they shoot it, because of the way the fletch is attached and the way it was cut at the front, it actually stuck into their finger as they loose the arrow. So we try to, as a safety precaution and to help keep the arrow in good shape, do that dab of glue front and back. I think that covers everything. As always, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. And thank you for watching. Have a good day.